Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
It's time now for Just Plain Theology from Rome, Sweet Rome, featuring Natalia Yuzhin. It's a program offered by Natalia Yuzhin on location in Rome. And Natalia, it's good to have you with us again today.
It's great to be with you again, Bob. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty well. Like you say, when we were talking off the air, there's a lot to talk about today, so over there and over here. So I guess you wanted to start telling us about the earthquakes and so forth.
Ooh, mamma mia, yeah. So we had a whole lot of shaking going on here on Wednesday. Now, our semester's ended, so it's crunch time for exams. Everyone's, studying for exams. Classes they finished last week, so things were winding down. So I was studying in the morning, and as I'm sitting here, I suddenly felt the wall and everything shake, and I thought, here we go again. I thought, oh no, and it didn't last very long, but then another wave hit, and then I could see the pot swinging a little bit that I got hanging, and the curtains started shaking a little bit. Didn't last very long. Then maybe an hour later, then there was a third one that I felt here. Now that one was pretty strong, and that went on for a while. I don't know, maybe it's hard to gauge because I wasn't watching, but it was longer than the others. And now I thought, oh no, poor Amatrice, the city that was hit last time, that region is just about, it's like 80 miles north of Rome. I thought, oh no, that poor place, But what's even worse is that they've gotten a lot of snow up there. And so in the process, in that region, there was an avalanche also.
all in the same place.
In the same place, yeah, because there was a hotel there it's a resort area because the mountains people go skiing. And there was a hotel, Rigo Piano it was called, and just the whole thing was just covered, And I think 20 plus people are still missing.
Wow.
So they're searching for them. And, it's not like it's hopeless because with the snow, even if there's debris, very often you can find pockets, where at least there's some air and you can, you'll survive longer there. But still, it's tragic. The poor mayor of Amatrice was thinking, what have we done? Is this a punishment from God? I think that's what he said. Because he thought, how much more can we take, But it was pretty strong here. And I had to go to the university in the afternoon, and they had closed down the subway. And the tremors were felt here. They were very strong because the earthquake itself didn't go very deep. It wasn't profound. I think it was about 10 kilometers, so it wasn't bad, which is why it was felt so strongly here. And wow. So anyway, that was a big deal. And, you have students, they evacuated some buildings here in Rome, and there were people and students from various universities sort of milling about because they evacuated the buildings just in case of, any structural damage that would occur, tremors. But eventually the subway did open up and everything was fine. So we didn't have a problem here except that, made people a little nervous. But the poor people up north, the rescuers are still finding people and pulling them out of the rubble. But there are pictures of this debris. One picture just shows this large window in the hotel and all the snow and debris that had just come through. And it just gives you an idea of how massive that the avalanche must have been. This hotel, it's a resort area. It's just completely gone. So wow, it's unbelievable.
Is that unusual for a couple of earthquakes like that to happen? So soon like that in Rome? Do they get a lot of earthquakes?
Up north in that area of Amatrice, you do get earthquakes. These are places that are fault lines, and even they had a very serious one in Assisi a number of years back. Even up north now, I have relatives that live up in the northeastern corner of Italy, and up in that area there was an earthquake a few years back. I can't remember, it may have been more than just a few, I can't remember exactly. So it's not uncommon. They're not usually that strong, but on occasion it is. But for us to feel it in Rome, apparently that's not so common. This last wave, in the ones in August, and then now, this is a bit unusual, I'm told. So, like I said, it makes people a little nervous. But it's I mean, one of those tremors. There were 10 since Wednesday. I mean, 10 officially. Those who measure these things have told us that there were 10 earthquakes, and 4 of those were above a 5 magnitude. Wow. One of the tremors was a 5.7, so that's pretty big. Now, it's not disastrous like it is in other areas, but even so, it causes damage and people get hurt and some die. It's.
Well, then you wanted to talk about the earthquake we had here, right?
Yeah. So I'm completely distracted over the weekend trying to follow on all the inaugural events as best I can from here, and it was interesting to watch from afar all of this. I mean, the speech and seeing the attendees and the long faces on the Democrats and all of this it was interesting. There wasn't a lot. I didn't hear lots of comments here about it, probably because the circle of people I know, they're all Americans, and so we're in the same boat, sort of watching it from a distance. And we're all studying, so it's not like we're having a lot of interaction with necessarily our Italian neighbors right now because our noses are in the books. But it seemed to me an extraordinary thing. It really was. It was something.
Well, it's something we haven't seen. It's something we haven't seen for a long, long time. That's for sure. It was a very patriotic inaugural ceremony. I mean, people were cheering throughout the talk, and of course, President Trump was. He was just, I don't know. He was so excited about being there, and just couldn't say enough about America and how he wanted America to be great again and so forth. But the thing that's happened since that time, today, in fact, they just announced it. The president has signed 3 very important pieces of, well, you wouldn't call them legislation. I don't know how.
Executive orders, I think. I know one that.
Well, the one that he's done is to eliminate the federal funds that are going to Mexico for abortions. Now they say that all the Democratic presidents signed that for it, and the Republicans were against it. So President Trump followed through and eliminated that again as he signed the order. And then they also they separated themselves from the Pacific Rim, and that's something that involves trade with China. And they said actually the Democrats thought that was a pretty good idea too. But Senator McClain, he thought it was not a good idea because, but I think Trump was going to try to find some other way to establish trade with China. So those were 2 of the important things, and they were just starting a press conference, but the secretary was late. Spicer, the press secretary, was late, so I didn't get all of that. But it's obvious that President Trump has followed through in signing those 3 orders. He has followed through on his campaign promises. All 3 of those were his campaign promises.
Yeah,
so,
the one.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the one about defunding International Planned Parenthood. They call it the Mexico City policy. Yeah. So that those funds cannot go to groups overseas if they are performing abortions, and
yes,
federal funds can't go. So that was big news, and I assumed would happen. We'll see, because the other thing in terms of trying to defund Planned Parenthood domestically, I understand that bill is, waiting through Congress. We'll see what happens with that, because that has to go through Congress. He can't just write an executive order for that. But this he could, and he did. So that's a good thing, because, Bush had pulled the plug on the Mexico City, policy.
Right.
I mean, for the federal funding, he pulled the plug on that in his policy, and then Obama funded it again. So it's not surprising that he would do this at all. I think, even if there had been another Republican candidate that got in, it would not have been a surprise move to do. But whatever, it's good news. That's great. So it's a good start.
They pointed out on CBS too that as far as that Pacific Rim order is concerned, they said that Bernie Sanders, who was, the Democrat with for the vice president for Hillary, said that he was felt the same way that they should get out of that Pacific Rim agreement. And then when Hillary found out that these other people were against it, or in favor of that she also said she was then in favor. So everybody, I guess, thought it was a good idea, except Senator McClain so far. But it was interesting to see that Pope Francis today said that he was going to have a wait-and-see attitude because he didn't want to make a judgment on whether this was going to be good or this was going to be bad, or,
At the risk of sounding flippant, he is the one who said, "Who am I to judge?" But we'll leave that aside. But well, I mean, on the one hand, though, I mean, as just to keep feet on the ground as a Catholic, I mean, you don't look to princes, for any of this. It's a worldly thing. This is politics. And, you hope that things will be there that are in accord with what, with the gospel, with Christ. But in the end, this is, you can't look there for any kind of salvation, let's put it that way. So actually, taking a wait and see attitude, it makes sense. I mean, because you just don't know. Now, so far, this is great, but at some point something's going to happen that people are not going to like and get upset about and what have you. So, it's wiser to take a wait and see attitude and see what happens.
Yeah,
in the end, it's politics.
Right. So we're, there's no guarantee on what's going to happen, but it was obvious that Pope Francis was praying for President Trump. So,
well, yeah, I mean, you would hope so. So, and it's just a matter of not displacing your faith, and I think this happens sometimes, especially in the States, that there can be sometimes a temptation for either party to, assuming it's a person of faith anyway, to place too much of that trust in the earthly realm. And then there's disillusionment and disappointment, whereas if you keep your feet on the ground and just say, well, this is, you can't put your faith in the human beings there. They're quite fallible, as is made clear constantly to us, and that's fine. Now, for those, right, it's like I said, this signing that executive order is a great first step, and it's nothing that hadn't been done before. So it's one of those things you would expect to be done by him, and so that's great. Thank God. So that's wonderful. And the speech was, very strong in terms of it was him. I don't think anyone should have expected anything different either from the inaugural speech, and just mentioning things like God and a creator again in a very clear way is just refreshing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's for sure. I know it was very refreshing to me. But then Saturday, of course, we had the Women's March, which was certainly flies in the face of Trump there by having that the day right after the inauguration.
Right. From what I saw, there were in Washington anyway. There were approximately, the numbers tossed out were about 500,000, maybe a little bit less, but right around there. So it was a good number. But there are many people who didn't want him, to be elected. But to call it a women's march is just disingenuous. Ultimately, I mean, what they're doing is capitalizing on some of the lewd comments that he made which were indeed lewd and vulgar. Of course, that was 11 years ago, not in the source of the campaign. I mean, not in during the campaign. So to latch onto that, it gave them a vehicle, gave them some kind of impetus and some way to provoke an emotional reaction in those that they wanted to attend to get the numbers up. But I mean, ultimately, this was something politically from the left, as anti-Trump rally more than a pro-women march, really.
Right.
That was, I think.
And the pro-life people, when they heard about the march, they wanted to co-sponsor it, and they were not allowed. They were not allowed to be a part of it at all, except a number of pro-life people apparently were in the parade, including President Trump's campaign manager. You said his name is Kathleen. Her name is Kathleen Connolly.
Yeah, right.
I think she said she was going to march in it anyway, whether they wanted her there or not.
Right, because
she's going to be a speaker on Friday at the regular March for Life.
Right.
Coming up in Washington.
Yep.
By the way, your friends, Dr. Lorraine Hartnett and Christine and Father Glenn Reed are going to be marching there in Washington.
I know. I wish I could join them. Oh, I wish I could be there. Yeah, they're going to be there. And that it's going to be it's good. And that's really where you're going to have a march for women. I mean, really. It's really.
Oh, by the way, the press secretary, they said on CBS he was late in coming, so we hadn't heard from him yet. But yesterday, he had a 5-minute tirade against the press for the way they handled the crowd numbers at the inauguration. And he didn't let anybody even ask questions in that first press conference. He had 5 minutes. They said he really took after him.
Well, yeah, I saw that. I thought that was a little silly, frankly, because it had more to do with it was like a ratings game. I mean, it's saying, someone was saying, "Oh, you didn't have as many people as Obama." It was sort of silly, which takes away a certain credibility that they have. I don't know. It's like now that you've got this position, use it as the. Ari Fleischer, who had been the press secretary under George W. Bush, someone had interviewed him, and his comment was that, okay, you've shown that they have delegitimized the press with the leftist bent reporting on them. So now that you've got that, leverage it and use it, but use it wisely. This is not
exactly.
But perhaps it's just a learning curve in the process. You got to pick your battles. You have to be smarter about that. I think that's what it seemed like to me. But yeah, so the march. Oh, by the way, that senior counselor to Trump, Kellyanne Conway, that was her name. Kellyanne.
Kellyanne.
Connolly is Kellyanne Conway. Yes, she's going to be a speaker. Cardinal Dolan's going to be a speaker. There's going to be Abby Johnson. She was one who used to work for Planned Parenthood, and has written that experience.
Oh, she was in the parade. She was in the parade, and there were 3 people that tried to knock her over. She was in a wheelchair. She hasn't been feeling well, apparently.
Here, yeah. Nice, huh? It's a march for women, so we're not going to let you talk. We're not going to let you sponsor this. We're going to be exclusionary, so much for tolerance.
Yeah.
There's
yeah, and then, she actually got bumped by three people.
No, love
intentionally.
Nice. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yep. Unbelievable.
So anyway, that's that. Now, what's unless you want to add anything else, what's happening at school?
So school, we are like I said, we've finished classes. So we have next 3 weeks are full of final exams, and so we're all studying feverishly and have our nose in books and it's just it's crunch time. So all the stuff that you've been imbibing all year and studying now's the time. As one professor says, now's your opportunity to share it with your professors. Would that they all looked at it so benignly. I don't know that that's always the way it's viewed, but if we approach it that way, theoretically, it's supposed to help in your preparation because it takes away the angst. I don't know if that's really true, but that's okay. So we've, had some study groups and all that. And what was nice for me this past week was on the 19th. It's a big feast day for us. It's what would normally be called elsewhere the Epiphany. We call it Theophany, since the revelation of the Trinity. It's basically the baptism of the Lord. There's a solemn blessing of the water. That's a beautiful thing. And so we talked a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago, and so we had that feast on Thursday. So this is the day after the earthquake, okay? Now, the day of the earthquake, when you felt the tremors here, because the subways were closed, it took me an extra hour to get to school, and, I ended up seeing a fellow student on the way, and we traveled in. We had to go to the train station, then take a bus, and the bus was a nightmare because it was just so packed full of people because the subways closed. And it's always an unpleasant experience to be on one of those vehicles when you've got so many more people than legally should be on there. But that's the way it is. And so the next day, I go to the Divine Liturgy, and normally for these big feasts, there are lots and lots of people, far more than that tiny church can hold. Ukrainian parish. It's in an area called Monti. It's one of the larger, oldest regions in Rome, and it's right where the Piazza Maria dei Monti is. There's a piazza there, a little fountain, and there's a church of the Latin Rite nearby called, Santa Maria dei Monti. So this church is the Ukrainian parish, and the bishop is frequently there for the liturgies and for Vespers. It's a very alive and vibrant parish. It's a wonderful place. And, so when you have these big feasts, you can expect lots of people. And they had, I think that day they had 3 liturgies. So you're thinking, okay, maybe the one at the end of the day won't draw such a crowd. So I got there about a half hour early thinking, maybe I'll get a place to at least stand, someplace where I would be able to access some oxygen in this church that could hold maybe 70 people, I think, comfortably, legally, maybe. And there were hundreds of people. There was just hundreds of people. It was unbelievable. I got there a half hour early. I couldn't even get in the building. Little by little, and as people came, they would push from behind, so you ended up getting squished through the crowd, kind of like toothpaste through the tube, It's just, I mean, on a natural level, you could say it was just awful and horrible. But the Holy Spirit is there when you can look up and say, well, praise God, everybody's here. It's wonderful. However, it's like it is in the Latin Rite. I mean, this is true of every church, If you have a liturgy where the people get something, either they get to take something home with them, or they bring something and then they get it blessed and then get to take it home, you will get about 50% more people than you would if that didn't happen at the liturgy, even if it was the same feast. I'm telling you. So whenever we have, it's kind of like Ash Wednesday, right? It's not a holy day of obligation for the Latin Rite. It's not a holy day of obligation. People assume it is. They think they have to get their ashes. They don't, actually. I mean, you don't have to. It's not obligatory. But again, they go because, and this is something we need because of our nature as being soul and body. That physical expression of the faith is necessary. We respond to it. That's ultimately what's behind this. And so there's something about putting all of yourself into the expression of the faith. And so when that's coupled with these physical elements, it's powerful for the individual, for everyone. And Ash Wednesday, certainly, because I know people who walk around the city, you'll recognize who's a Catholic. Now, here in Rome, everybody's, so many people here are Catholic, that's fine. But in the United States, let's say you're someplace where you don't, maybe in the South, like Alabama, where 3% of the population is Catholic. And, suddenly you're walking around, and generally speaking, you wouldn't necessarily assume that most of the people around you are Catholic. Imagine walking around, suddenly you see ashes on someone's head, and then oh, yeah, okay, someone you may have just seen in passing. And that marker is the kind of identity. It's an indication of that invisible mark on the soul for any Christian, who's been baptized, been incorporated into the mystical body. But here the physical expression of one who belongs to this particular church, the Catholic Church, it's powerful. But I know lots of people who aren't Catholic even go. I mean, you hear stories about Protestants going, Jewish people going, who say, I can't hurt.
Is that right? You mean to get the ashes?
To get the ashes. Father Groeschel, when he was still alive, would talk about this. Father Benedict Groeschel of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal would talk about this in various shows because he in the Bronx, where he was, you have all kinds of people. But he said he frequently see Jewish, and he always had a good rapport with anybody in wherever he was that was Jewish, Orthodox, whatever, of whatever persuasion, if you will, because he grew up in that kind of a neighborhood. So he was, and people always had a very Jewish sense of humor. He would always comment on that. And so there was always a rapport, so I think he's always had those kinds of friendship. But yeah, they would say, I can't hurt,
I never heard that before. Yeah,
it's funny. So there's something about going and being reminded that you're not all that. You are human, you are finite. There is a God. He is greater than you. He is your creator. Yeah. You are dust, and unto dust you shall return. That's powerful. It's because the truth is powerful, and to be reminded of that, somehow it strikes a chord, even if it's one that might to some people sound a bit dissonant, but it's right, and I think that's what it is. So anyway, so there I am at this liturgy, half hour before, thinking, okay, we could all just get trampled. I mean, really, there's nowhere to go. If anything had happened and somebody panicked, there was absolutely no way out. I mean, maybe through the sacristy there was a door. I mean, going through the sanctuary there was a door or something. But other than that, I mean, there was the one side. I don't know what would have happened. But so the liturgy's going on, and I'm thinking, okay, as it's going on, it's getting time to go to communion. I'm thinking, I want to go to communion. But typically, in some of the Eastern Rite parishes, you won't get a large percentage of people approaching to receive Holy Communion, because there's still an ethos of maybe having gone to confession either that morning or a few days before, thinking you can't receive unless you do that. And, that so many don't. They figure if they haven't gone right before the Divine Liturgy, they shouldn't go receive communion. So many of them don't. And I think, a lot of priests wouldn't want to dispel that notion, saying, if you're not in grave sin, it's okay because it's too always the venial sin. But still, you don't want to do that because you don't want to get it in their head that confession is any less necessary than it is. You don't want to do that. So they're okay with this, I think. I don't know. And there is something about that too. That's to watch someone refrain from going because of that. It's you have to balance things out. You don't want to be scrupulous, but to be aware that you should be having a kind of sacramental life where you are consistently going with frequency to the sacrament of reconciliation, to confession, or as we would say, the mystery of penance. You're going consistently with some frequency, but again, the consistency is the key. And that way you're prepared to go and you're living out a spiritual life. Then you should be okay. You don't want to get scrupulous about it. In any event, but the practically speaking, though, trying to get to communion in a crowd like that, you've got to push your way to the front. There's no other way, And even here, you couldn't push. You had to let people somehow breathe in so you could be squeezed forward, because that's what it was. It was the force from the crowd behind you that would push you through if you managed to get anywhere near the line of like the toothpaste, as opposed to being part of the tube pushing people through. You wanted to be in the toothpaste area. You were the material that they were squished forward. But the good part about that was, because not everybody went to communion, so by the time you go and receive and you turn around, you can't go all the way back to where you were. So you're stuck closer to the action, which was great, because at the end of the Divine Liturgy is when they have the beautiful solemn blessing of the water. And that's a very powerful ceremony. It's really fantastic. They have usually a basin of some kind, in this case two, and they have water in there. And it's a beautiful ceremony where you have the priest who will dip. There are 3 candlesticks. Each one has 3 candles. And those get immersed into the water and the candle's extinguished. And there's also the dunking of the cross, the dipping of the cross into the water 3 times. There's an invocation of the Holy Spirit, and then the priest blowing on the water, he dipping his hand and making a cross into the water. It's very rich, it's a very beautiful ceremony. And at the end of that is the big payoff for everybody who stayed. This is what everyone came for. All the empty water bottles come out, and everyone starts pushing forward. And this is when I thought someone could get killed here, because you get to take the water home with you. We will drink it there and we'll take it home. It's very much like what happens at the Easter Vigil in the Latin Rite. Because in many instances, I think in the early church, this was a time when catechumens are baptized also in the East. So part of this is left over. Whew, it was absolutely crazy. So, and because people, when they got up to get their water, could not turn around and leave because of so many people behind them, they had to open a door, let them through the sanctuary, out through another building. It was just crazy. It was absolutely insane. And I thought, what are these Italians thinking of these crazy Ukrainians? I mean, here we all were hundreds of people in this tiny little church, and, for this, and they just must have looked, and this area of Monte is very, it's known as a hipster area, so a lot of cool people hang out. So on Sunday mornings, you'll see all the bottles of beer and wine and empty glasses from the night before. The very early liturgy on Sundays, you hear the garbage trucks coming and picking up all those bottles and everything for all that's been happening there, because it's just one of those locations where, young people gather and they drink and, go out and have dinner and like that. But here instead, as many people as might be in that piazza on a Friday night and a Saturday night, doing something other than praying to God, then here we are, probably as many people trying to fit inside this church doing the same thing. And I just wonder what the regulars in that area think of all of this, the ones who own the restaurants and the shops and such.
Really?
It would be interesting. They see it all the time. And even on Sundays, it gets so crowded at one of the early masses. It's beautiful.
I have an interesting story. When you talk about big crowds, there's a friend of Rhonda's down in Corpus Christi, Texas. His name is they call him Commander Al Hughes. He was the commander of the U.S. Air Base in Antigua, down in the Caribbean. And he was. I don't think he was an atheist. He was an agnostic. His wife was a cradle Catholic, but he didn't really believe in God. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But at one point, when he was thinking about it, God said to him, well, if you don't believe in me, why don't you just pretend like you believe in me and see what happens? Well, it was amazing. I mean, there were just all kinds of miracles that happened and so forth. But the one was after he decided to become a Catholic then, the miracles were still coming. Like they told him now, you're a new Catholic, you should go to midnight mass. That would be very good if you went to midnight mass. But remember, you got to get there early. You got to get there at 11 o'clock at least. So they didn't get the kids ready in time, so they got there about midnight, and the place was packed out. I mean, you couldn't even see through the door. But he somehow got over by the door, and there was an usher in there and was welcoming him in there. He was motioning for him to come in. So he went in, and he had his wife and two kids, and this usher took him right down in front.
Wow.
Down in the first or second row. And then afterwards, he tried to find the usher, but there was nobody that looked like that usher at the end. So it was a real miracle. I mean, it was an angel,
That's something. Like it's kind of like saying, "Welcome home."
You should have had that opportunity yourself, trying to get up in front there.
Well, I'll tell you, like I said, once you received Holy Communion, then after I found myself right near the front, and maybe five, well, there were no rows, it was just too chaotic, but much closer than I was before. So in the end, it was good. So God looked out for those.
Oh, you did? Yeah, so you were able to stay up in front then.
Well, because once you receive and you turn around to go back, there's nowhere to go because it's just a wall of people. It's impossible. And I thought, well, why bother? I said, I'll just stay here, and
Really?
So that's what happened. And when I first got there, I noticed that there was a Latin Rite priest there. He had a beretta on, and he was dressed in like traditional Latin Rite clerics with the Beretta, and I thought, this poor guy, he can't get out. I'm watching it, he turned around, and there's this wall of people, and he looked a little afraid. I'm thinking, he's not going to get out. And he thinks they're going to part ways. They might, because it's a priest, they'll do that. But boy, I'll tell you, if he wasn't dressed in clerics, they wouldn't care. And people get a little rough when they've got that stuff, whatever's in front that they want to get, they got to get it. That's it. In this case, it was the holy water. So,
wow.
It was something. But, it's beautiful to see so many people coming out, and there seem to be more and more. I mean, they really do keep the faith, the Ukrainian women. Now, last week we were talking about immigrants. And so here are all these, mostly women, who've come from Ukraine. They come here for work. The situation is just so bad back home. And, who leaves home, generally speaking, unless you just don't see a way out or you don't see that there's any way forward back home, generally. I'm just speaking generally. So they come here for a kind of work. And, we've touched on this issue as well in terms of, the women leaving sometimes families behind. It's very difficult. But they go to church. They do go to church. You see them going on Sundays. They keep the faith. And that sustains them. You can see it. I know that the bishop here, Bishop Dionysius, he had just for the Ukrainians here and for Spain, he just wrote a book. I'm sure it's in Ukrainian. I'd like to get a copy at some point about the experience of these women coming here and living here as immigrants and, what happens to them and all of that. And I know that they were so profoundly grateful for him caring about their story, what's happened to them. But they do keep the faith. You see them at church. They have each other for support. They cling to God. They know that this is vital for them. And you have to give them credit for that, where in many of other churches, now in Italy, but more than other places in Europe, you still see pretty good mass attendance. I don't know the numbers, but I know in France, when I spent a little bit of time there, and I mean, it was just abysmal. The people that go, don't go, I should say, to cathedrals. I mean, you'd think, at least on Sunday, a place like a cathedral, the see, there would be people there on a Sunday for the main liturgy. No, very few. Germany, the same. In southern Germany, it's better. Austria is a little bit better, but even so. So I think Italy is probably better off that way. I don't know about Spain. But then you go to our churches, and it's just overflowing. I mean, it's just crazy. So in a way, I felt so proud, of our people that come here exactly to keep the faith. It was really beautiful. And I remember thinking, this is a blessing to be part of this, to have been incorporated into, yes, the mystical body through this church and this Eastern church, to have this perspective. It was a beautiful moment, it was really nice. And I have to say, towards the end of it, I really didn't mind being in that crazy crowd. I figured, that it's like family. Even if you don't know them, you don't know everyone's names or anything, but there's something about, when you're with people of the same culture, even though I'm from the States and they're from the quote unquote old country, but even so, there's something there that's recognizable, that ties you, the cultural ties that bind between language and all those traditions you have, and this particular rite of, the particular church that we belong to, of the Eastern Byzantine rite. It's a beautiful thing. So it was a great experience. Actually, it was nice, but it was so crazy. It was so crazy. I've never been in a crowd like that. I've never, ever, ever felt like I could possibly get trampled with all these people here. Never had that experience. That was new.
The only time I had that experience was on Times Square on New Year's Eve.
Ah,
that's the same thing. I mean, you're like a grape there, being squeezed.
Yes. Someone else said that to me. I think one of the seminarians I was telling about this experience. He goes, "Yeah, it's like that." Yeah, it's got to be. I've never been there for that, but I imagine that's what it's like.
But that when you talk about immigrants, it reminded me about the inauguration speech. There was Trump talked a little bit about. Well, he used this a number of times. America first. Mm-hmm. And there was a little tone of isolationism in there, you know. And I don't think we want to really get back to that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have to see if it works out.
Right. Well, like, you know, you'll see what happens. I mean, on a practical level, you have. I think what people would hope for is that, number one, that, you know, a sense of pride in your own country is going to be restored. You know, no one likes to see a president going overseas on what Obama had his apology tour. You know, you can't do that. That doesn't build morale amongst people. This is not the way to live. Walking around head bowed, bowing and scraping, I'm sorry. And, you know, ultimately it's disingenuous. It's not really true. And it's not doing honor to those who sacrificed anything, not only to make this country, this great democratic experiment, but also all those who fought for it and all those who've risked so much to come here, because for all the bad-mouthing, come here, there, for all the negativity that you hear about various things about American culture, people still keep coming because they know. If to this point still you can get to the United States and you work, you got a shot. You can't say that about most other places, you know.
No.
You can't. So that, and realistically, having so many people, you know, in the United States, after a time things do bind, and no one's saying that you don't keep, you know, your ethnicity, you don't keep your culture, you don't keep the language you speak. There may have been a time, like when we were talking about the late 1800s, when you have the wave of immigrants coming over from Italy, many of Italian descent will say, oh, yes, my grandparents, they, you know, wanted us to speak English, and therefore we lost the Italian language. We didn't speak it at home, and they were lamenting that fact. There's no need to not learn the language of your ethnic background and have it. It can only enrich you. It's not going to hurt you. And just living in another country, if you're a child, of course you're going to learn the language. You're not going to not learn it. You become more assimilated by virtue of simply being there. So young, going to school, being with friends, learning the language formally and informally, and viewing the culture that way too. Some of which you have to be careful, you know. But that's it, yeah. But so I did get a chance to listen to the speech and all of that. But it's what you would expect, you know. He got in because he is who he is, and for better or for worse. Right, for whatever anybody thinks. I mean, this man has the capability of getting people to follow his lead, and so you know, let that be done in a good way. We'll see what happens. But you know, he did refer to Scripture and to God, and someone could say, well, that's just a political ploy. I don't know that it is, but you know, it's always, anybody could really do that, you suppose. But the idea of just bringing jobs back, and that started already, even before the inauguration, should be helpful to people. But even a robust sense of pride and hope for the future, this is, you've got to give that to people. You know, you can't feed them gloom and doom all the time. I mean, it just doesn't work.
Well, that was the big thing with the separating from the Pacific Rim, was to bring back jobs to Americans. Well, many people said that was and that was one of his campaign promises.
Yeah, it'll be good.
To bring those jobs back.
I was wondering if for the March for Life that's happening this week, you know, if there'll be a statement from him. I mean, I'm sure he's not going. I mean, I'd be surprised if he was there. Wouldn't that be something? That'd be a great message, you know.
Well, Bush never attended, but he did have I think he had a recorded speech that they used there.
Right.
President Bush. So they're saying, well, Kelly Lee, as you said, she's going to be there, like you said, as a speaker. Vice President Pence, he could be there. He's probably been there before.
Yeah.
And who knows if Trump might show up.
You never know. It'll be a wonderful event. It's always surprised, you know, you think how many hundreds of thousands of people go to this every year, through blizzards, through all sorts of things, and you see virtually no media coverage of it. So you had this quote-unquote Women's March, where you had reportedly, 500,000 in Washington, in different places in Washington, D.C. But then, let's say you had on a regular basis, and it increases every year, 300,000. I don't know the numbers of it, but I know it goes into the hundreds of thousands. And so, you don't see mention of this in the numbers. And it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So you can see, the agenda in keeping this out of the mainstream media, except for certain outlets. But in general, you just don't see it. But it's an important event. Yes, I wish I could go. So I was talking with Dr. Lorraine, and so she'll be going. I imagine that this year, last year, I understand that there were awful snowstorms, and so lots of people couldn't make it.
Buses, some buses didn't make it.
Right.
And, it was a terrible snowstorm.
Right. And this year, I don't know that they'll have that problem, and so, but also, I just think that there will be a very hopeful atmosphere there this year. Might draw more people. It would be a good thing. Have you ever been?
Oh yes, I've been there a number of times.
What was it like, Bob?
Well, it's exciting. There's so many young people there. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting. The places where they're having the liturgies in the morning on Friday are just packed out.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of churches, and they've added a new hall there now, so that should help.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a real experience. And then there's so many things to see in Washington. Some people go early because you got the Smithsonian. You've got the beautiful air museums and things like that, airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so many things that...
When you were there, did you go, you went to this, I said when you were there, you went to the shrine of the National Basilica?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. The first year I went, I went with Cincinnati the one time, for the people in Cincinnati, and we went on a bus and we went early. So then we were there, but last couple times I went with the seminarians from Holy Apostles, and they leave on Thursday night, and they come back Friday night.
Mhm.
So we don't stay any place. So we're just there for the march, and that's it. So
that must be.
I've seen it both ways. So.
I never got a chance to go. I had always wanted to go. I never got a chance. And now here, when they do a March for Life in Rome, it's in May. Last year was in the beginning of May. And you'll get some thousands of people there, but it's nothing like the March for Life in Washington. It's not even close. But you do get a lot of people out. This year, I'm going to try and attend. I found out about it too late because I probably just wasn't in the right place to hear about it, or maybe there just isn't the organized. I think perhaps the Americans aren't as organized about attending that. Maybe they are. I'm not sure. But sometimes a lot of these announcements come late, and then by then you can't, or something. I forgot. But anyway, this year I'm going to see if I can go and see what that was like. It doesn't have the same push that it does back in the States, though, is from what I can hear. But
it's because of the Supreme Court decision. I think that's why.
That's
why they have it in the winter, too, because it's close to the anniversary.
Right.
Maybe it's the day of the anniversary, isn't it?
I think it's usually around there, which is why the time of the year. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to the Basilica there one year, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is just magnificent. I'd never been there before. Just the
Basilica, and I wound up sitting in the second or third row.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate. But the priests and the bishops and the archbishops and the cardinals that are there, it's amazing.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just keep coming.
It's extraordinary. Yeah. It's so huge. And it just, there's a mosaic icon in the back, of Christ. Someone once called him, the rock star Christ. They didn't like that particular mosaic. The angry Christ. They think he looks angry, and I think someone didn't like the blonde hair or something. I don't know. So I went in there thinking I'm going to hate this. It's going to be awful. But it was actually quite impressive. The sheer size of that, you can't not help but impress you. It's just enormous. But really, it's an extraordinary experience. But go back to the date of the Roe v. Wade. It was January 22nd when it was decided. I just wanted to look it up quick just to make sure. So it was on that date. Yeah.
By the way, Father Glenn Reed, who just been ordained recently in Wyoming, is now back in Washington, and he's preaching at the Basilica now.
Oh.
And he was ordained as a deacon there. We were there for his ordination as a deacon last year. And now he's on the staff there.
Praise God.
So that's interesting. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
So when do you start back to school now?
So classes start again officially on, I think it's Monday, the 13th of February. Up until then, we've got exams.
Oh, okay. So you've got a few weeks.
Yeah, because the exams are spread out, so you have time for studying and just to make sure you gather all your notes and just, study days. It's important because when you have classes and you're getting the bulk of the information from lecture, you want to have some time to assimilate all of it and prepare for whatever questions you're given so that you know what to focus on. So the professor gives particular questions and just, prepare all of these. You might answer a few of them or what have you. So it's interesting for a student from the United States to come here and take oral exams almost exclusively because we don't do that in the States. We tend to have written exams. They're usually an essay exam. And so you've got to present an argument in written form based on something, which, this is just what we're used to. So to come here and have oral exams, sometimes to us it's a tough to get used to because you can't waste time talking out your thinking. You cannot think out loud. That doesn't work. It works against you, So you have to go in ahead of time, just make sure you've got your points down. And, when you're not acclimated to that, it takes some getting used to. So there's that element of the whole thing. But then also just having that Christmas break before the semester's over, to us is just so strange. I still can't get used to it, but that's the way, that's the way it is. No big deal. You get used to these eventually, I hope. So classes start on the 13th, and I'll have some classes in Italian next semester. We'll see how that goes. Italian will definitely get better by the end of the semester. Yeah.
Are you planning any trips during these next couple of weeks then?
No, I don't think so. I think I'll be staying here for now. Over the Christmas break, I got a little sick, and so I think I just want to stay here and just, enjoy whatever days I'll have free, whatever time I'll have free after exams, and just, rest up a little bit and just maybe take advantage of being here in Rome when there aren't that many tourists and go see some things here. There's plenty to see, and like that. So, no, I'm not planning on going anywhere. I mean, maybe I'm going to see if a friend of mine from Northern Europe might be able to come down and visit for a bit, which would be nice. And that's it. The rain. We're waiting for the weather to get better. It's been raining, but it's been so cold for Rome, unusual for here. And you could see snow on top of the mountains. So that's fun.
Has reality sunk in there, or is this still a dream?
I'm just here. I have to tell you though, I have these moments when I'm walking around the city. And it just hits me. I thought, I never dreamed I'd be living in Rome and studying. If I could think back, 10 years, 20, further back, it just never was a thought in my mind. So you just never know what's going to happen. Once you
have something.
It is. Once you give yourself to God, in some
Right.
profound way, anyone who's had that reversion experience, they've gotten serious one way or another, or, you hear about people who've had conversions from, let's say, Protestantism or maybe from a non-Christian religion of some sort, that there's always some fear and trepidation because you're leaving the familiar and going to a land you know not, kind of like Abraham being called out. And so you go in faith, and nothing is wasted with God. I think that's the one thing I've learned along the way is absolutely nothing. There's nothing you can give to God can ever be considered, should I or shouldn't I? Will it be wasted? Never, 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 never. Ever. No time, no effort, no anything, no small coin to give to someone in charity, no hours help, no time you spend in prayer, no extra mass you may go to during the week, no extra, vespers you may go to because you think, well, should I, shouldn't I? Whatever it is that you give, you get so much more back, which isn't the reason to do it. I mean, you just do it because it's the encounter with God. You want to develop the relationship. But
yeah, that's right. No, that's a good point. Fasten your seatbelt.
That's right.
When you give yourself to the Lord, huh? The one I think of a lot is Joseph. Just think of Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they got rid of him. I mean, they gave him over to the traveling guys. And look what happened to him when he got to Egypt.
I mean, yes, his story is absolutely incredible. It gets to the point they never dreamed they would see him again.
No.
Certainly not in those circumstances, and never probably imagined that he would have greeted them eventually with love and a forgiveness.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? That's such a beautiful story.
It certainly is. It really is. It is. You wouldn't think, and there it is. But But it takes faith, which doesn't mean that your stomach knows what that is necessarily, but you take the step forward, even though it feels a little queasy doing so. But that's okay. You step out in faith and see what happens, and be ready to bless Him in the good and the bad. It's always easy when it's good, right? But the real test is going to be when the tough times come, and can you say as much, praise God in those moments. It's not always so easy, but if we can manage to do that, then we know we've grown in faith.
That's right. Natalia, I think we're pretty much out of time, so we will see you again next Monday.
Okay.
Same time, same station on WCAT Radio. And I know you're going to have a good time now during this week when you can rest up a little bit from some of your studies, huh?
Yeah, and then focus on that. That's the game plan.
Okay. So in the meantime, God bless each and every one of you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. God bless you, Bob.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.